What you're watching at America's airports right now isn't government inefficiency in the abstract. It's a deliberate political choice, executed with all the care and competence of a late-night cable rant. And it has the fingerprints of Donald Trump and the modern Republican Party all over it. When TSA officers go unpaid for weeks, when attrition spikes, when call-outs rise and security lines stretch into hours, that isn't a mysterious act of nature. That's what happens when the party that controls the levers of power decides that breaking the system is useful to them. And then, rather than fix the thing they broke, they roll out a made-for-TV substitute. ICE agents wandering airport terminals like someone dropped them off at the wrong gate with the wrong assignment and no plan. The scam is as old as Trumpism itself. Step 1, create or worsen a crisis. Step 2, blame Democrats for the crisis you created. Step 3, propose a theatrical solution that doesn't solve the crisis, but does expand the power of the most aggressive arm of your political agenda. The point isn't competence. The point is domination and spectacle. The point isn't moving people through checkpoints. It's putting a uniformed symbol of state force in the most public, most stressful, most surveilled civic space imaginable, and daring the country to object. If you're stuck in a 3-hour line, you're not supposed to be asking why the workforce wasn't paid. You're supposed to be looking at the ice jacket and thinking, well, at least somebody's doing something. That's the trick. Confuse intimidation with governance. Let's be blunt about the underlying math. Airport screening is not a vibes-based activity. You can't replace trained screening labor with a different badge and pretend the belt moves faster. The bottleneck is staffing and training at the checkpoint ID verification, bag screening, secondary checks, machine operation, and the choreography of a high-throughput security environment. When workers aren't paid, they leave, they call out, they can't afford the commute, they can't cover childcare. They can't keep their lives afloat while politicians play chicken with their rent money. That's not a morale problem, it's a payroll problem. And payroll problems have one fix: pay people, fund the agency, pass the bill, do the job. But the Republican Party can't do that cleanly anymore, because clean governance doesn't feed the MAGA machine. The MAGA machine runs on grievance and crisis, and the constant insinuation that immigrants, liberals, the deep state, whoever is most convenient this week, is sabotaging real Americans. So instead of resolving the standoff by paying federal workers and restoring normal operations, Trump turns the airports into a stage for his favorite kind of politics: performative cruelty paired with grandiose self-congratulation. And of course he claims it was his idea. Of course he does. Trump's mind is a museum of stolen props. He watches friendly media, hears a half-baked idea that flatters his impulses, and then he repeats it as though it emerged from genius-level policy deliberation. The right-wing pipeline launders nonsense into common sense, and by the time it reaches Trump, it's no longer a suggestion, it's an ego trip. The result is what we've come to recognize as the signature move of Trump's governance style: an announcement first, logistics never, confusion everywhere, and then a furious demand that the public applaud anyway. So you get the surreal spectacle of top officials contradicting each other in real time. One says ICE will help with tasks that require specialized training. Another admits ICE won't do those tasks. A DHS official, asked what the plan is, shrugs because there isn't one. That's not a slip. It's the operating system. A functioning administration coordinates agencies, defines roles, trains personnel, sets protocols, and communicates clearly. A Trump-style administration announces a stunt and lets everyone else scramble to justify it after the fact. The chaos is not incidental. It's a feature that allows the strongman to pose as the only stable center. Look at the mess. Only I can fix it. But the mess is his brand. He manufactures it the way a reality show manufactures drama. Meanwhile, notice what this ICE in airports gimmick does culturally. Airports are already spaces where people feel watched, controlled, stressed, and vulnerable. They're where families rush to catch flights, where tourists fumble with documents, where language barriers are common, where exhaustion and anxiety are high. Dropping a deportation-focused enforcement agency into that environment doesn't help travelers, it escalates fear. It changes the psychological contract of public life, from we're screening for safety to we're screening for people. It encourages profiling. It invites abuse. And it's designed to do exactly that, because MAGA politics doesn't just want to enforce the border. It wants to export the border into everyday life, into schools, hospitals, workplaces, and now airports, so that the state's coercive power becomes a daily reminder of who counts and who can be targeted. This is where Democrats need to say the quiet part loudly. Turning routine civic spaces into domestic enforcement zones is not a security upgrade, it's a political project. It is the normalization of authoritarian aesthetics agents in tactical gear, roaming public areas, vaguely tasked, unaccountable in practice, celebrated on partisan media. It's a preview of what Trumpism looks like when it's not constrained by norms, law, or basic administrative competence. And it is being sold to the public under the guise of efficiency, even as the underlying inefficiency, the unpaid workforce, is intentionally maintained as leverage. That leverage piece is the heart of it. If the country's leaders wanted TSA lines to shrink, they could make that happen with the oldest tool in government: appropriations. You fund the agency so workers get paid and staffing stabilizes. If the country's leaders wanted DHS to operate normally, they could stop using federal workers and travelers as bargaining chips. But the MAGA GOP has redefined governance as hostage-taking. They want their Save America wish list, or whatever branding exercise they've slapped on the latest set of regressive demands. And if they can't get it, they'll light the house on fire and call it patriotism. And please, spare us the whiplash-inducing moral lectures from the very people staging the crisis. Republicans want to posture as the party of law and order, while refusing to do the most basic law and order function of government: keep the security workforce paid so airports can run. They want to declare themselves the guardians of public safety while deliberately stressing a system to the breaking point. Then they bring in ICE as a mascot of toughness because they know their base responds to uniforms and force more than it responds to competence or policy. It's the politics of intimidation as a substitute for management. There's also something deeply revealing in how casually they treat federal workers. TSA officers are not props. They are people who show up before dawn, stand on their feet for long shifts, deal with the public at its most frazzled, and shoulder the responsibility of security. Withholding their pay is not a clever negotiating tactic. It's economic abuse. It tells every public servant in America, you are disposable, your mortgage is negotiable, your childcare is collateral, and then they expect gratitude because a different set of agents walked into the terminal and stood around. That's not leadership, that's contempt. So when travelers look at this mess and say, I blame Trump, that's not partisan hysteria. It's basic cause and effect. The people in charge chose shutdown politics. The people in charge refused workable off-ramps. The people in charge turned a solvable staffing crisis into a public spectacle. And the people in charge are now pretending that the spectacle is the solution. This is the MAGA governing philosophy in miniature. Break something essential, blame the outgroup, then expand coercive power in the name of fixing what you broke. If you're wondering what a second Trump-era Republican government looks like when it's given more room to run, it looks like this only scaled up. More chaos, more scapegoating, more stunts, more empowered enforcement agencies, less actual competence, and a public trained to accept dysfunction as normal, as long as it comes packaged with an enemy to hate and a strong man to cheer. Democrats shouldn't treat this as a temporary embarrassment or a quirky headline. It's a warning. The lesson is not merely that Republicans can't govern, it's that they increasingly don't want to govern in the traditional sense. They want to rule through crisis, spectacle, and fear. The antidote is the most unglamorous thing in politics: funding government, paying workers, following process, and refusing to let authoritarian theater replace actual solutions. It means telling the truth about who is holding the system hostage, even when the hostage is a crowded airport terminal filled with exhausted people who just want to get home. And it means saying clearly what this ICE stunt is: Not a security plan, not a staffing fix, not a serious policy proposal, but a propaganda maneuver designed to normalize a more aggressive, more politicized enforcement state. If the Republican Party actually cared about airport lines, they'd pass the funding and pay the workers. If they cared about safety, they'd stop treating competence like weakness. If they cared about the country, they'd stop setting up crises so Trump can posture as the guy with the paperclip idea of the century. But they don't. They care about leverage. They care about the performance. They care about power. So the next time you see ICE roaming the terminal while TSA workers still wait to be paid, understand what you're looking at. You're looking at a party that would rather weaponize the federal government for political theater than do the basic work of keeping it running. You're looking at Trumpism doing what it always does, announcing a plan that is really just a camera-ready show of force, hoping the public mistakes, intimidation for leadership. And you're looking at the cost of letting one movement turn governance into a perpetual crisis machine paid for, as always, by ordinary people stuck in the line.